few people have noticed a contradiction between a verse in Romans 10 and a verse in Matthew 7, and thought I would address it because it takes what we think Romans 10 to mean, and we actually discover that it's something much more fantastic, much more edifying. So the verse in Romans 10 that I'm referring to, I'll just look it up here really quick and read it to you. It's one that you're very familiar with. Probably heard it many, many times, but it's Romans 10:9, and it says, if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord, and you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Right? That's a verse that's been used many, many times to actually to support what is commonly referred to as the sinner's prayer, and especially things that we have people do associated with that. Signing cards, standing up, raising your hand, especially walking down aisles to the front. And it's often said that if you do that in a church setting, in a church context, then you're believing with your heart that Jesus is the Christ and that God raised him from the dead, and by walking forward, by raising your hand, by standing up, whatever, you're confessing with your mouth that he is Lord, and that's what those verses have been taught to mean in 21st and 20th century America that we all find ourselves in. The problem with that is, and these are also familiar verses, I'm not sure that you ever sort of thought about the juxtaposition of the two of them, but in Matthew 7, one of the hardest passages in all the Bible, not so much hard to understand, but just hard to hear. Jesus says to me, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. This is Matthew 7:21. But he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven will enter. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? Did we not cast out demons and perform many miracles? And then Jesus says, I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. So the problem here is and you can probably see the contradiction now that I'm starting to point it out. But you got all kinds of people that are confessing that Jesus is Lord with their mouth. In fact, the repetition. Remember, Jesus is a rabbi. This is a Hebrew person teaching Hebrew people this, and the repetition is. It's basically just saying. It's not just saying people that declared him to be Lord, but people that emphatically declared him to be Lord. I declared you to be Lord. They might say in front of the elders. I did it in front of the church. I did it in Sunday school. I did it. I did it in evangelism. They did it all over the place. All over the place, people are declaring him. These people have declared him to be Lord, and they're clearly shocked. They're surprised that they find themselves before this great white throne judgment. They didn't expect to be there. So clearly, they believed in their heart. At least in some fashion, they believed in their heart that they were saved, and they confessed with their mouth that Jesus is Lord. So, what's happening here? What's going on with this contradiction? Well, the reason why we don't understand is we live in a secular society that is soaked in Christian tradition. And we've had very, 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 very little persecution to deal with here. And so we're reading it with 21st century ears. That's our problem. This was not a confusing verse in the slightest to the recipients of this letter, Romans, when they received it in the somewhere around 62, 63 AD in the first century. Rome, as you'll remember, was the capital, of course, the capital city of the Roman Empire, which ruled the world at that time. So this church is in the middle of the capital city of the world, essentially, and they so they are right in their own backyard is where the Caesars lived at. The Colosseum, all those things that's so famously associated with the Christian persecutions. This is where they lived at, and so and they very much understood what Paul meant when he said, "If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord." I'll just tell a brief fictional story, although it's historical fiction, to illustrate what is meant, and I think it'll make a lot of sense. Picture me, and I'll just use two of my friends that some of you may know, but Ben and Guy. And me, Ben, and Guy, we let's just say that we work construction, for example, and it's a Tuesday afternoon, and it's lunch break, and so we're kind of sitting in the grass, and there's the 15 other guys that we work with. They're all milling about, just sort of eating their lunch. We're taking a break, and life is good. It's a sunny day. We're Christian, right? We've been saved. We have this opportunity to work and support our families and so on and so forth. So life is good. And the three of us are just kind of sitting there talking. Maybe we're talking about the things of the Lord as we eat lunch, and suddenly off in the distance we hear a sound. And it's the sound of soldiers marching and drums beating, and suddenly there's an awful feeling in the pit of our stomach. And Guy was telling a story to me and Ben, but he stops and everything goes silent. And I look at Ben, and the three of us all know what the sound is. Nobody's said anything about it yet, but I can watch Ben, trying to swallow as he nervously realizes what's happening. And pretty soon a battalion of soldiers come walking up. 4 of them are holding an altar that has a fire going in it, and we hope that they're going to pass on by us, but they don't. We hear that altar crash to the ground, and a soldier that tells everybody to line up, and everybody else has been there and done this. They know what's happening. It's no big deal. The first man in line is not a Christian. We watch a soldier force everybody to get in line, and then one by one we're asked to go up, take a pinch of incense, throw it in the fire, and declare that Caesar is Lord. And that was something that everybody was required to do back in that time period. And we know that we can't do that. We know that there's only one Lord. And as we're in line, we're nervous, and our hearts are pounding, and adrenaline is just pulsing through our blood, and our hands are sweaty, and we're sweaty, and we're shaking, and Guy is the first one up, and a soldier points a spear at him and tells him to pay tribute, and hands him a pinch of incense, and Guy pauses and he thinks things through, and he thinks of his wife, and he thinks of his kids, and he thinks of the Lord Jesus that saved him, and he gets up and he says, "Jesus Christ is Lord." And those to us, those are no big deal words for Americans living in 2013, but those were treasonous words in the first century when this letter was written. And immediately a soldier walks up and chops his head off, and we watch his head roll down on the ground. And now it's Ben's turn, and Ben steps up, and racing through his mind are images of Tessa, Guy's wife, and his kids, and what's going to happen when they find out what's happened, and then thoughts in his own mind go to his own wife, Courtney, and he thinks of his 2 little boys, and he's so nervous, and he just knows that all he has to do is say that Caesar is Lord, and he starts to try to convince himself in his mind that God will understand, and he doesn't have to really mean it, but then he realizes that what kind of a message is that sending to the soldiers? What kind of a message is that sending to the co-workers? What if his proclamation, even if it ends up taking his own life, what if that could be the catalyst that gets somebody else to see what he has seen? And besides that, Jesus Christ suffered and died for him, how could he do any less in return? And so Ben gets up and he says, Jesus Christ is Lord, and immediately a soldier with his sword cuts his head off. And that's what's meant here. That's what's meant by Romans 10:9. Romans 10:9 is a verse that we can read and skip right over, but to the first century Christian, Romans 10:9 were radical words. Radical words. Jesus is Lord, that phrase is sort of it's almost a companion to our patriotism. You know, we have "In God We Trust" written right on our money, and Jesus Christ is Lord is only slightly more provocative than that statement, although it's becoming increasingly more so in the last decade or so. But that word was treasonous language, not companion language. It was not a patriotic thing, as it is in America back then, to say Jesus Christ is Lord. It was a treasonous thing. And so Romans 10:9 is just, it's a very, very, very similar statement to many of the things that Jesus said when he said, he would say things like, if anybody would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. In other places,